also discuss the final type of grouping game, which is the profiling games. Now, in a profiling game, everything becomes unstable. And when I say that, I mean all the variable groups will now have zero restrictions or limits on them, right? Like you can have, let's say, car J, V, W, X, Y, and Z, are getting new windows or whatever. It's no longer completely determined, right? One can have 5 windows or 3 windows, etc. And same for the windows, right? One way you can go with the car T, V, W, X, Y, and Z, right? Like there's just no restrictions whatsoever. So because of this, it also means that either variable set introduced can also be used as a base of the setup. So in that example I used with the cars and windows, either the cars can be the variable set, the base setup, or the windows can be. To ensure the best setup, you need to first identify that it's a profiling game. You need to notice that both groups are unstable, and then identify which variable set faces more restrictions. You would always use this setup as the base, or use that variable set as the base. So, this is a quick little recap that players will be assigned to at least one group rather than exactly one. This is possibly the biggest characteristic of a profiling game when it states that players will be assigned to at least one group rather than exactly one. So, here's an example of what I was describing. 4 different community colleges: Coney-Dale, Deadwood, Evergreen, and Fieldham. I think I said that wrong. Each offer at least one of the following youth programs: origami, painting, squash, tennis, and weaving. Each program is offered by at least one community center. The following conditions govern the assignment of programs to community centers. As I described earlier, there's limited restrictions, right? There's not an exactly one. This is at least one for both variable groups. So you know that it's going to be unstable. Important to note that one of these characteristics alone do not entail a profiling game, right? So if it says 4 different community centers, C, D, E, and F, at least one of the youth programs, and then the other one says each program is offered by exactly one, right? That's not a profiling game. It's a profiling game because both variable sets say at least one. Both are undetermined. When we identify it, it comes with a big caveat, right? While it's possible to make it the game with either setup, there's always one that will make it so much easier, so much simpler. So, in this picture you see number 1, there's C, D, E, and F. The other one is the other side, right? It's so the first one is the community centers, and these ones are the programs, right? I think one says tennis or whatever. Yeah, origami, painting, squash, tennis. That's what these ones are. So which one's the better setup? And you decide that once you look at the rules. So when you read through the rules in a profiling game, you can identify which variable set faces more restrictions, right? So always use that variable set, the one with the more restrictions, as the base of the setup. So, Deadwood offers exactly 2 programs. Fieldham offers tennis, okay? Evergreen cannot offer both squash and weaving. So, as we can tell just from reading that, Deadwood, Fieldham, Coney-Dale, Evergreen, we already know that the 4 different community centers, right, the C, D, E, and F, this has to be the base of the setup. It just has to be. I mean, it's becoming so restricted, right? This offers this. Fieldham offers tennis. Coney-Dale offers more programs than F, right? So the community centers, if you're using that as the base of your setup, it will be so much easier to visualize and also form deductions, restrictions, and even the rules. This I just want to provide another example of how a setup would look like. So in this, we see V has power window, and also under the assumption that both variable groups say at least one, right? So we know it's a profiling game, so only when you know it's a profiling game, we can make these kind of deductions. But anyways, V has power windows and a sunroof, all right? W has power windows and a leather. Okay, X has more options. Okay, so obviously the V, W, X, V, and Z, this is going to be the base setup. So when you look, okay, so apparently these are cars, right? And these are the accessories. So it seems it's pretty apparent that cars are being restricted, right? They're the ones with these different restrictions on them. Like W has power windows, X has more options. These cars are not the base setup. Like that's what you should use. So here, uh, T, V, W, X, Y, and Z. Remember, it says at least one, meaning that there can't be none, but it also doesn't mean that there's going to be two or three, right? It's at least one. It could be one. So that's why each group has only one line to fill in the slot, right, for the variable. So the power windows, P and S for the sunroof. There could be two, there could be three, but there can't be zero. So that's why you have at least one for each of them. Here is basically a final recap, which can be credited as a blueprint where they say in a profiling game, both variable sets aren't stable. We know that. And then number two, it's possible to set up a profiling game with either variable set, but it's best to form your set using the variable set with the most restrictions, and that's true. Number three, work through the rules very slowly. Since the deductions will build on each other, so make sure to review rules as you uncover deductions. And this is actually a really good tip because when you work through the rules, since it's so unstable, right? There's just so many different options. There's not a lot of limitations. It means the only thing you have to form deductions are the rules. I know that sounds pretty obvious for each one, but for profiling games, it's even more necessary, right? Like, you better use the rules the best. You better make as many deductions as you can, or you're not going to do the game. Like, you're not going to solve it. And number four, the most important deduction will flow from limiting the sizes of the groups. Always test whether each rule limits how many players can be assigned to each group. Now, what does it mean by this? The important deduction in a profiling game will be based on limiting the size of the groups. So here, a showroom contains exactly 6 new cars, T, V, W, X, Y, and Z, and then here's the accessories that we already mentioned. I'll show you what that looks like. Here's the cars, T, V, W, X, Y, and Z, the accessories. So when looking at the rules, it says W has power windows and leather interiors, W right here. W and Y have no options in common, so W and Y, which means if W has power windows and leather interiors, Y can't have that, which means Y can only have the whatever the last option is, right? Power windows, sunroof, a leather interior. So Y has to only have the leather interior. X has more options than W. Well, since W has these two, that means X has 3. Anyways, the blueprint shows that down here is exactly what they did. Y has S, there's the sunroof, whatever. X has all 3, and W has P and L. Also, it's important to note that when there's a maximum or a minimum, or when there's a maximum, you'd use a vertical line. So right here, W, it stops right here. They only have these two. It has P and L only. X has to have 3, 1, 2, and 3. Also, it actually doesn't even say W has to only have power windows and leather interior. It just has them. So it could have had 3 if it wasn't for X. X has more options than W. Well, there's only 3 options, which means to have more, that means it has to have 3, and then W can only have 2. But if this wasn't here, if it didn't say X had more options, then W could have had the power windows and leather interior, or it could have the power windows and leather interior, including the sunroof, right? So, let's not limit it. Just you have to use other rules to form deductions, make limitations like that. So that's gonna be all for this video. I'm not really gonna go into the specifics of how to go about a profiling game, the practice tests or whatever. Maybe prep test 63, 64. When I do those, then I'll do a real-time video of me solving the question myself, so you can see my thought process, right? You can see what I'm thinking about, what I'm attacking. When I go about the games. But yeah, it's not really necessary now. I can talk about strategies and how to go about it all day long. But in reality is I'm using the grouping relationships I already shared with you from a couple videos ago, right? Like I'm using the same relationships. It's just obviously the games are different now. Right? There's unstable, there's stable. There's profiling games, in and out games. But either way, the premise it stays the same. How like the strategies stay the same. So my next video, when I do a real-time video, or eventually when I do a real-time video, I hope you can learn something other than me, going on and on about profiling games and talking about them. But anyways, I hope you guys found this video helpful, and take care.